You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a bunch of us together to talk about some wild and weird stuff, I'm sure. This is part two, kind of, to Pyramid Power. I got my boy Headless Giant with me today. Headless, what is going on, sir? Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this one. This is like the meeting of all the minds that are just going to be shaping the future, and people don't even know it yet. This is fantastic. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. I mean, really, it was all your idea. You know, you brought on Ronnie, and this brought on Ricardo and Leon. So thank you, Headless. I appreciate it. And we got the man himself, the OG storyteller, Robby Marx. What is going on, Robby? How are you today?
Hey, how's everybody doing? Yeah, just been doing work. Sent the last chapter to my book into the editor last night. So that's cranking away, and yeah, things are good.
Good for you, man. Good for you. Congratulations, man. I love hearing that. I love it. And someone who's been on the show a few times, Leon. How are you, sir? Thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to just let everybody know what your deal is real quick?
Oh, cheers, thanks. Yeah, I'm an Orgone researcher and acupuncturist, and I'm probably best known for repeating Reich's Oronor experiment, because that hadn't been repeated since 1951. My aim is to find out how Orgone and consciousness relate. But I started off with looking at Orgone and acupuncture. So I'm kind of a bit like an unpaid academic, really, is what I am. But I get by. Yeah, and I'm coming to the States in May. Right. There's the first Orgone conference to be held for a long time in California, May 24th or 25th. That weekend, being put on by JPOT, which is Psych Orgone Journal. It's one of probably the only journal doing sort of physical research in Orgone, or publishing it, and that's an open access journal.
They're probably not owned by the Maxwells, that's why.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Thank you, Leon. I appreciate you coming on, man. This is really exciting. Now we'll get back to a returning guest, Ronnie. Ronnie, welcome to the Abyss. What is going on, sir? You want to just let everybody know what your deal is again and plug yourself?
Yeah. How's it going, lads? How are you? Looking forward to a great chat here now today. Myself, I am a HVAC and refrigeration service engineer. So what I done was I was on the show here before, with yourself, Nick, and Headless, and then Headless, me and you had a great chat there previously as well. So what I done was I basically applied what I do every day in work to the pyramids, and and so what I'm doing at the moment now is there's a couple of things like from our last chat. So there's been an experiment that's being conducted, where they've more or less essentially proven that the alignments could be the alignments that we described in the previous chat we had can be used to actually induce Earth's energy. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm actually using that within my work now myself for peer review. So I'm building it all up together now, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks we should be getting a bit of good news, lads.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was wondering if this is the alignment you were talking about on the Earth's surface that's in relationship to the poles and the equator, right?
Yeah. So when you were talking about power generation, so essentially it's your north-south alignments. So that's all like electrical theory. And even Leon, I was listening to you when we were having our pre-chat there. It's even, you think like with your Orgone box, do you ever try align it to the north-south axis?
I have,
because with that power generation, yeah,
I've thought about that. I'm pretty sure that would make a difference. and I got a compass to check the alignment, and the Orgone box deflects the compass by up to 180 degrees when you put it near the box. So it's got quite a strong magnetic field of its own. Or one time I put the box back upright because it was originally designed for someone to sit in. It's about 6 foot long, and the Orgone charge went down about 20% when I put it upright. So I put it back down horizontal, which I think with it being closer to the earth, it's more kind of grounded into the earth's energy. Plus, Roberto Maglione, the Italian Orgone researcher I was mentioning earlier, well, I think all churches and pagan sites are aligned, and the Roberto and myself reckon that they kind of accumulate Oronor, or that Oronor is an Reich's abbreviation for energized Orgone. So so I'm pretty sure that if I got the box aligned to the cardinal points, it would be stronger. It's not exactly aligned at the moment, but it's the best I can do in the house. But then I'm on top of a limestone hill, so that helps.
You gotta make it happen.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Yeah, we do some experiments, lads.
Yeah.
All right. Now, finally, to the guest, the man of the hour, Ricardo. Thank you very much, sir, for coming on. I appreciate it. Again, Ronnie, thank you for even getting him on and speaking to him. I think that's what's up. You made this happen, and I really appreciate it. Ricardo, please let everybody know what your deal is and all your achievements or whatever you like to promote, please, sir.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to know all these new people. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy the conversation. So thank you very much for that. As for me, I have been a researcher in a multidisciplinary way. I started from religious studies, then mythology, astronomy, history, archaeology, anthropology, philosophy. Well, everything that I could put my hand on. I created a database that is now at use of the Institute that has about 300,000 files only of relevant books, so no novels, nothing like that, just academic papers, books, old books, rare documents, everything around that. So I help everyone that needs anything for research. Now it's going to be done by the Institute, but I've always, if anyone is researching something and they need material or anything, I'm more than glad to provide the material necessary if I have them, or if I don't have them, I will have them then, and we both have them. I'm not now very involved with the Institute for Natural Philosophy, of which I'm a proud founder. We are now a non-profit. We are already starting with several projects, from documentaries to museums to meetings, archaeological expeditions. We have a finger in many things. We are not a 501c3 yet. We are non-profit, and 501c3 will be done. It takes about 2 or 3 months to actually get it, but from that point on, we'll be unstoppable because we have the projects and we'll have access to the funds and the alternative academic world, because that's the proper name for those that are alternative but factual. Although they don't like us to be academics, but we are as much academic as they are, because it's all about experience. It's not about memory. The things that you learn in school are useful, but mean nothing on the field. The fact that these people tell us that they can quote any book to say that we are wrong, they forget that our base of facts comes from them. So when we are quoting, they are forced to say, "Oh, but that fellow is that group of academics." They say so. So all of a sudden, it changed from the academic world to the subject. So they are getting out of arguments. That's what's happening. And one of our first projects is already being produced. Is a documentary called the I forgot the name of the documentary. I'm so excited I forgot it. It's the dear God. I will come back to that because I don't remember the name right now.
It happens when you have so much.
I'm having seven meetings a day, sometimes 8.
And now the pressure's on you, so now you're really going to space out. Forget.
Yeah. So. Okay. Well, I wrote it, but I can't remember. Okay, so
Robby was late because I emailed myself the link,
I
not him.
remember.
So I mean, it's all right.
It's called "The State of History and the Fall of Academia." That's the name of the documentary. So we have several, including academics, several people on it already confirmed and already working on it and filming. So it is going to be an interesting one. As for me, I am particularly interested right now in everything that it's concerned with archaeoastronomy, archaeoacoustics, because I think that those are the keys, especially archaeoacoustics are the keys to understand the megalithic culture. So the database that I gathered up in the last years looking into archaeoacoustics was finally, after all these 20 years, the key how these ancient sites were unlocked and activated when they can. So there are many examples within the academic studies that tell us that they just ignore. You have sites where you can have communication between two different places that are 666 feet away, where the sound comes out to the other chamber exactly at the same level as if you were next to the people. So you can whisper and you can still hear it on the other chamber that is on another building, another structure, 666 feet away, and you still hear it, and you cannot hear it in the field around it. It's just on that chamber and then the other chamber. And you have many examples like this. You talk about churches, Leon. So in the city of Alatri, you have 9. If I have to shut up, just tell me and I will shut up. In the city of Alatri, you have 9 gates that are oriented to astronomical elements. These 9 gates are activated with different strengths during the day according to the placement of the sun, but they all have a magnetic vortex at the head height to go in. So everyone that crosses those gates will have their brain automatically tuned to the frequency that was made to be done. So what happened in the past when that site was active, and instead of a massive church had a megalithic temple, what happened was that energy, because the difference between a megalithic site and a church site is that the megalithic site concentrated the energy in and radiated out, and the church concentrates every bit of that energy in. Very little comes out. So what happened before So what happened before is that you have a city with a hive mind state. So even today, people that go there and visit, and although the site is only dormant and has a massive church limiting the amount of energy that is irradiated, there are still people reading other people's thoughts. There are still people having experience they cannot explain. So it's a famous place where people go to visit and have experiences that they don't understand why, and they don't relate to the sites, but that they are documented. And in the case of the church, when they tested the church itself with a specific camera that detects those vortex of energy by registering the movement of air molecules, that's how they detect the magnetic vortices. They found out that the whole church was at the topmost level of detection for the system that is in color. So everything was red. Every crevice, every angle, every little bit of stone was irradiating red at the most. So what happens inside that church, and since the frequency is not concentrated, because for instance, if you have 4 Hertz and the four earths were not concentrated, you create a state of bliss, a state of well-being, of connection with the divine. That's how churches made all those donations, because they concentrated this energy inside, they activated with sound, and people have these experiences, and they feel they have a contact with the divine, with God, with something higher than themselves that can even heal, because it's a matter of self-activation. If you are believing that something is happening, you have a placebo effect, and you have actually healed. So this churches, they placed a 7-year-old child with professional people that do meditation, and it's a common knowledge that it can take for a professional up to 15 minutes to achieve meditation. Some can do it in 6 and 5, but it takes some time to do it. Within that church, with the site dormant, with no sound activation, the child entered into meditation in less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, I can believe that.
When people measure professional meditators on top of the megalithic stones, on the Cyclopean stones that are still on the site, the camera detects the energy and not an image, but you can see the stone and you can see the person. As soon as this person entered the state of meditation that focused it with the same frequency as the site itself, the person disappears, because it transforms itself into the same matter as the stone. So the machine, the camera, can no longer detect the person as long as she's in that state of meditation. So that's kind of synchronization. So this can explain perhaps Amaro Muro, for instance, where you can cross the wall and enter someplace because you became in the same frequency, you are the same material, whatever. There are many explanations for that. And here I'm just speculating to give you an idea of what happens. This has done in Newgrange when people meditating also disappeared inside the site. And this is all in academic papers. This is not woo-woo or anything that can be refuted. It's registered by the academics that study this place. And I think I talked long enough. I'm going to shut up. So I'm sorry. It was a long introduction.
No, that's very interesting.
That was wild.
Ricardo, I wanted to bring up the dolmens when you're talking about archaeoacoustics, because a lot of these dolmens are underground structures that have certain hertz frequencies to the Helmholtz frequency, right? So the Helmholtz frequency is the rate of vibration you get when you're breathing over the top of a glass. Well, that same rate can be translated to dolmen surfaces, which are like giant, air containers. And when you hit the right frequencies inside of these dolmens, it speeds up the process of meditation, and it brings people to sort of like an altered state of consciousness. So you're talking about like a structure that maybe has 2 hertz. So you're talking about banging a drum 2 times every second. That's a lot like the heartbeat frequency. So all of these things sort of compound on each other, and you can actually create melodies and everything else based off of these bass tones. And when you're adding all of these tones together, you're talking about people going into these structures and visiting their lost ancestors, That's why they're considered burial structures, is because this is one of the ways that ancient cultures would commune with the dead and get advice from their ancestors. And it's a form of technology that is almost completely lost, but when it's fully applied and fully opened up, we can start to see how much we've been deprived all these years without this.
Let me go on, Leon.
I was just going to say that some of the underground structures in Ireland are made with orgone layering. Like they've got layering in, and the Russians discovered that EMF is like or electromagnetic fields can like anti-psychic energy, and the life force and orgone type energies or subtle energies boost your psychic abilities. So if you're in an underground structure, a barrow, you not only have you got the orgone accumulating layers and the earth accumulating around you, and possibly water courses helping move the subtle energy, but you're also shielded from electromagnetic fields, so that it's got a double way of increasing psychic effects. I mean, if you can see the Orinor or Orgone box in the background there, so sometimes I put a mattress on the floor and sleep by it, and I can every time I've done that, I get a lucid dream or a vision, and it's I think I've probably done that maybe a dozen times, or maybe a bit less than that. But every time that
what is the frequency that the box emits? Have you measured it?
As in sound.
Yes.
But I don't know. I didn't even.
This is why I'm asking, because if you go to bed and find some kind of machine or sound equipment that can reproduce that same frequency, you'll have the same vivid dreams. And I can explain later why and how the elders did this, and how we know they paid to go to sleep in these places to have those vivid dreams.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
Asclepion. That was the form of healthcare in the ancient Greek days, is the Asclepion. If you had an illness, you would go inside these temples to sleep. This is where we get the term sleep in from. And so Asclepion temples was where they would be visited by one of the gods, Hygeia, for example, and she would come to you in a dream and tell you about your illness and how to cure it. And so they had these massive underground structures that they would act as sort of like a sort of a theater, right? So you're going through the ritual process and you're sleeping down in these structures where they release snakes and all sorts of animals that represented the underworld so that you could be reborn again. And it goes deep into Greek cosmology, but the idea is that ancient man during the Golden Age would return to the underworld at night and then come back to Earth fully renewed. So there was no death in the Golden Ages. So they use that as an example of how to cure people's illnesses, is by going underground, sleeping there, and then returning to the overworld revitalized.
Yeah, and as Ricardo was saying, that the churches have kind of taken on that function to some extent, or to
not entirely, but yes.
Because that's probably not encouraged really, but certainly they may have had that more in the past.
Well, I have a lot of notes already here, but to the last question, this one, the difference between the church and the ancient shaman, but I don't believe it was called a shaman, but in Europe, but in the megalithic culture, but the wise men or whatever that knew how to activate these sites and work them. The difference between these cultures is, I give you an example. For instance, the Templars discovered almost in conjunction with the Catholic Church how to work these sites. How these ancient caves where these ceremonies were done in the ancient Kemet, and then to the first Christians that have a strange name that I can't remember right now, they do it in particularly sound inducive places. So they found out about it, and they decided that they discovered the basic principles of how this works, and it's quite simple. The problem is you have to have someone that can find the energy nodes on the Earth's crust. That's the first problem that we haven't solved yet today. We have dowsers, but that's the best we can have. We have no mechanism to measure where these nodes are, but we know that they did. So the second point is, according to the functionalities you are looking for, you have to choose the proper mineralogy. You go in church, that's why sometimes you go and find stone that are 5 yards away, and sometimes you go 500 miles to get the stones because you want specific stones. One of the major misconceptions that we have about stones is because of the names. For instance, sarsen stone is not a stone. A sarsen stone is a crystal of the purest you can have. So it's 99.3% minimum pure quartz crystal. And go and look and see how many of these megalithic sites, especially in Brittany, has sarsen stones. The Egyptians didn't have sarsen stones, but they have a specific type of limestone that was highly high in content of quartz. So they serve the same purpose. But going back, the difference is that the church used this power for their own devices. For instance, they created an instrument that could create the trinity of sound. Because if you go and look for archaeoacoustics, you found that the key to activation is something called the trident of frequencies. And this trident of frequencies starts with what Headless Giant mentioned. That is the natural resonance that exists. That someone will call it the Schumann resonance. Others will say, as Headless Giant said, that is a fixed frequency, more or less, that varies just 0 point something from one place to the other. Then you have the middle frequency that can be induced by humans. That is normally either the 440 beats per minute, a bull roarer, if you don't know what a bull roarer is, and if you've seen Crocodile Dundee number 2 or number 3, when he's calling his friends, circling a piece of stone on a string, that's a bull roarer. It creates a woof, 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 woof. That's the sound. So in terms of...
Jump in real quick. So Hades was said to have a bident, not a trident like,
because it doesn't need, the other one is the earth that produces it.
Well, they said in these legends about him that he was able to move through the ground, like tunneling, without ever touching the earth using his bident.
Yes.
Which to me sounds a lot like archaeoacoustics. He's got a massive tuning fork right in front of him that he's using to clear out the path for himself.
You can understand that if you think of a glass subject to sound, and in the exact moment where it achieves the point of non-breaking yet, he's completely like plasticine. If you could keep that state, you could model stone, you could model anything you like, as long as you find the correct frequency and find the technology to stable that frequency, you can keep materials in a state of they are malleable, no matter what they are. So in terms of digging tunnels, I wouldn't know how that work, but I sure think it's possible. I just didn't figure that out yet.
Sorry, the sound from the Oronor box. Sort of roughly, how would I go about measuring that? Because some people can't hear it.
You will be able to measure it quite simple, and I explain you why. Because we can hear it, which means that it is between 12 to 16 hertz to 22,000 hertz. That's what we can hear. More, although with age we go up to 18 hertz to start to begin with listening, but some people can hear much lower than that. And you, for instance, perhaps you can hear 10, 8, 9. You have to have a special equipment to produce that kind of sound. But that's a test you should make and see how low can you hear or feel. So any microphone.
I have two methods. Oh yeah, you're going to talk about the microphone one. So if you hook up the microphone and the speaker together inside the box, you're going to get the resonant frequency coming through that speaker.
I'm not sure that's safe.
I mean, it's just going to take a little bit of time, but
inside of a box that is produced to create effects, that's the problem. We don't know what those effects are.
That's true. I'm just thinking about that's what they do inside of these cathedrals.
Sure.
They'll run the microphone right up next to the speaker.
But the cathedrals are dormant.
Right.
Then you get a frequency feedback loop of the occurrence of the phenomena.
That's where you get the cymatics.
Yeah.
They'll get the frequency feedback, and then they'll play that in front of water, and that will give the cymatic effect of the entire cathedral.
That's why you find these massive stone basins in all of these megalithic sites that were placed on top of the bedrock inside of the structure, so they know exactly when they achieve the frequency that they want. As we can see in the art, they leave those spirals, those designs. Those are the key frequencies that can be seen by cymatics. That's why churches and cathedrals have that thing called a baptismal basin that are nothing but devices that create what's called the living water or structured water. Because living water and structured water are means of healing beyond anything that we can imagine. So if you read my paper about the Osiris shaft, you'll find that the Osiris shaft is the only self-contained, completely autonomous healing structure that I have ever found. It doesn't need to introduce sound because it produces its own sound, and because it has these 3 enormous shafts that are not connected to the structure that create that resonance constantly, and they don't appear in this new scan, which is funny because they should appear in this new scan that everyone is talking about. They keep this system autonomous for healing inside the structure. But I'm kind of lost now. Your question was yes, I would just put a microphone on the outside. Sorry?
I was just going to say, he was just asking how to test.
Yes, so you just have to put a microphone next to the box, record the sound, and then put it on a software computer. It will tell you what the frequency is. The problem of putting a microphone and the speaker inside the box is this. When the sound starts to go back and forward, it would create what is called standing wave. When you create a standing wave, you have nodes of energy that are sourcing themselves by the constant back and forward. So the energy rises without limit. That's why you see ancient sites that seem to be blown away, because these guys went there testing this to create the functionality, tried to open a portal or whatever, and they destroyed the site. That's why Christopher Dunn, when he tested Archaeoacoustics inside the main chamber of the big pyramid, when they started to increase the modulation and the standing wave started to increase, the sound, those 4 hertz, for instance, instead of being uncompressed, became compressed. And what happens when you compress 4 hertz? You create your own nightmare, because your brain starts to showing you your worst nightmares. You have limb loss control, madness. This was warfare. This was used in warfare by the Russians and failed completely because they couldn't direct the sound to the enemy. So everyone was affected, and they started killing each other and so on, and mad and so what. And this can still happen inside the megalithic site. You have an example from a Viking king that came to a meeting with an English king, and there was a massive storm on that day, and he was forced to enter Newgrange to keep shelter. First of all, this tells us that Newgrange was open, so it's not a burial site, it's a ritual site. And they enter in the chambers to safeguard from the rain and the storm. What happened was 2 of them decided to stay on the first chamber to the left, and the other ones on the other chambers. Those that left on this first chamber to the left, the sound, because of the Humboldt effect, was concentrated more on the wind was by accident straight on into the building. Those 2 guys went completely mad, and they have they had to tie them up because they're trying to kill everyone. So they got late to the meeting because of these 2 insane men. And that's how we know that this happened, because it was registered the motive for them to being late with the meeting with the king. So that's why we know that this happened in Newgrange.
And you think it was the electrical storm that kind of interacted with Newgrange and created that, or was it specifically the sound?
I believe, like today, for instance, there's times where teams go to Stonehenge, and Stonehenge, I know it's been heavily modified, but still have some same effect. And if the wind is not coming from the right direction, there are no detectable energies inside Stonehenge, for instance. So it's all a matter of how the sound is produced by the movement of air molecules. And it depends if the site is active at that point, if the underground water is moving fast enough. There's lots of elements that create these nodes energy points. Let me just go through my notes. Who mentioned snakes? You did. Okay. The snakes they don't have to be literal. Because of what I said just now, you can see the snakes without them being there. because it's a natural fear for those people at that time. You have to enter their mindscape to understand their culture. So they might not have been literally snakes spread upon the floor, because people would go inside and will start to see the snakes because of the resonance that exists within the site. And those that are there know that it is so.
What they thought was that the snakes represented the constant shedding of skin. So this was how they would,
Renew, yes.
Renew
Constantly renew, yeah.
Symbol of the snake. So they would release them in these places, and it would be good luck if they crawled over you.
Sure, I understand that. In terms of the ancestors, that's very interesting, because I think it's also a misconception. It is the ancestors, but it is not the cult of the ancestors, because today what are we doing in the highest levels of technology to store information? We are learning how to store information into crystal by sound. So what these ancient megalithic sites have, once the frequency is introduced, yes.
So this is a great book about the fourth phase of water by this guy, Gerald.
It's another name for structured water, yeah, or living water. It's another name for it, yeah.
Right, but he's the guy who documented it. He was banned from TEDx for talking about this stuff. But basically, this easy zone is capable of producing a charge and capable of storing memory through these crystals that are formed around any hydrophilic surface. And so these partial crystals that are formed by sunlight will now have an effect on storing that information, because anything you put into the water is going to start knocking out molecules from this partial crystalline structure. And that same information is carried kind of like a punch card every time anything else is put in there. So it kind of proves the existence of homeopathy as a very valid substance, because the water itself is carrying the information from all of the things that are put inside of it.
Not only the water, but also the crystalline matrix within the stone that connects all of the sites. So you have to think of a megalithic site as something that can have many functions. One of them is the storing of information. So when you have the ritual inside, you are imprinting, and you can go and search for vibrational imprinting. There is something we are learning to do today. So they are imprinting their memory of the ceremony, of the stories that are being told, of the wisdom that is being shared into the stones. And when they have these experiences on solstice, of equinox, on festival days, they revive this knowledge from the shamans that came before, from the ceremonies that came before. They shared this hive mind state that surpasses it's alive and what isn't. And they could also commune with the other people doing on other megalithic sites all over the world at the same time, at the same day, and having a communal experience, more or less like people have on a church, but the church are closed on the one structure. So the ancestors is true, but from the point of view that it's not so much the cult of the dead, but it's the cult of the knowledge that is imprinted there by the ancestors, that they go there and revive and increase moreover. In terms of your box, I have two more points. Sorry. In terms of your box, I think you should apply Feng Shui to it, meaning you should orientate your box to the correct placement. And it doesn't have to be north. You have to measure it and see how the box decides to be, because it can create its own magnetic effect, and that will distort the magnetic effect of the line from the earth. So you can, instead of being direct to the point of where sync it is, you might have to adjust it according to its interference with the energy node.
Ricardo, go ahead.
One
Leon.
question for Leon, sorry. I just want to ask Ian if he ever measured the levels of ionization, and if it has any effect with solar, if you measure it in accordance to solar activity or the phase of the moon.
Me, yeah. I've measured ionization rates or Geiger counts for Orgone fields or Oronor fields, and it goes up over the day, so that there is a correlation to the phases of where the sun's at, and a correlation to what the weather's like. And from other studies, not my own, I'm pretty sure that like cosmic or solar and lunar influences. Well, there's definitely Orgone studies that, like yourself, I've spent a lot of time collating the research that's gone on in the past. No one's ever done a complete bibliography of the Orgone studies until recently, which I've done. And there is a fair few studies where they've collated Orgone activity with lunar phases.
Is it any way related to what was previously known as Aether?
As what, sorry?
Ether.
Ether, yeah. Oh, it's definitely the same thing.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'd say ether is non-biological Orgone, and then once ether becomes contained in a membrane, then one would call it Orgone or subtle energy. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. There's a few differences, I think, that you could. Well, I don't know if there really is any differences. It's just kind of measurement, how people have measured it with, like Orgone tends to be measured with temperature or Geiger counts or biological effects, whereas ether tends to be measured with light refraction.
I don't have anything on Orgone. I have some things on Aether. Old things,
yeah.
But on that, it was the first time I ever heard the name. To be honest, I'm sorry, but
Right.
I never heard it before.
Well, if you think about, I think a good way to explain Orgone energy, feng shui energy, ether energy, is to think about it from, I guess, the Rupert Sheldrake sort of point of view, because he calls them the morphic fields.
The morphogenetic field, yeah.
Right. So these are the things that exist before it becomes matter. So all of this stuff is connected to something precursor to when things come into form. And if you think about this world sort of
it's
like
midi-chlorians.
Right.
Yeah, that's the bions in Reich. So very few people know that. That's really that's quite obscure, that connection. And the pre-atomic, Reich actually used to call Orgone pre-atomic energy. And so, but Reich didn't know that the ether experiments were the Michelson and Morley ones were pretty much falsely reported. They weren't really falsely conducted. Well, but they were kind of not conducted properly because they were conducted in the wrong place. But the Orgone researcher James DeMeo, he wrote a lot about ether and collated all the positive ether experiments that have gone on. I think even Michelson himself sort of believed that there was an ether. But that's a whole other subject. But I wanted to ask you about when I went up to a stone circle in Cumbria. I put a piece of charged orgonite, which is like an Orgone accumulating compound, rather than, instead of being the layers as in an Orgone box, it's more a matrix of plastics and metal fragments and crystals sometimes people put in. But I charged one of these Orgone compounds in the Orgone or Orinor box for quite some time. And then I put it on top of one of the stones in this Cumbrian stone circle. And I could, after I put it on top of the stone, I could see a blue light going upwards from the stone, and then the humming started, like an EMF hum that I hear. I think maybe the reason I haven't measured it or thought to measure it is perhaps because I suffered from electrosensitivity for quite a while. I kind of thought the humming was coming from inside my head almost, because some people couldn't hear it, and I could like hear it internally. And Reich never really looked into sound and orgone. So I think my discovery of Oronor having a sound is the first time anyone's ever looked into that in the orgone field, as far as I'm aware. Although Roberto, he has looked into radiation in churches, but I don't think so. I'll definitely look into that.
Sure. And have you placed crystals inside it?
Yeah, I put crystals inside. They absorb orgone and then re-emit it.
Like something like this.
Yeah, that would be ideal for experimenting with.
Leon,
You know what? You know what? Just a curiosity. You know what I find? This is I have one that is double this size from the same stone. Do you know where I found this?
Mountainside?
No. I found this in a cargo of boulders that we use to make the foundations of houses and buildings. So it's limestone. That's an English name. So it's limestone, and the limestone came with blocks this size of quartz into it. And I've seen lots of loads with this material, and I've never seen anyone with quartz, and they just ignore it. It just came, they just broke the stone and filled the trucks and move it out. So limestone has quartz.
Yeah, that's right. Didn't they face the pyramids with something similar to that?
No, the pyramids are the stone cases. I think Kieran will be better to answer that. But does the stone
polished white limestone, yeah,
limestone, yeah,
and that's all the material of it. Yeah. And there's inner casing blocks in as well. But come here, I just waiting to jump in there, lads. So it kind of goes to you, Ricardo, and you, Leon. So you were saying about the serpents, Ricardo. So when you think of like, I was listening to you, and I always think sound waves or sine waves in like an electrical term. Well, that's kind of what I always think with the serpents, right? But to go to yourself, Leon, and a possible experiment with that box. So I can hear that hum in the back. And the little hamster in my head was bleeding doing cartwheels there. I was thinking there that an experiment, as Ricardo says, about plugging into your laptop and a measurement. Another thing you might be able to do is like a guitar tuner. That might be able to pick it up with even like a speaker attached. But what I was thinking is, so we'd use tools. It's just oscilloscope. So that measures your oscillations in like in like I say, an electrical measurements measure electrical currents and stuff like that, voltages, blah blah blah, right? But the experiment that was going through my head is hooking that up to something like a speaker. So imagine you have like a speaker is essentially just like a little magnet, and then it's obviously picking up your vibrations from that. 2 wires off that connected to the oscilloscope, right? And then see if you're picking up anything in the sine wave. See what the actual sine wave is doing. Like you can, like I can't remember all the different types of sine waves. You can have zigzags and jigsaws and all just like different symbols. So I was just thinking, it's like it might be a good little experiment. And then as myself and Ricardo says, check your orientation, and then even apply like electrical theory to it. Like as it says, look at your rotations. Where do you lie in regards to latitudes? And like you said, you're in Liverpool, so you're probably just on near enough the same kind of line that I am. Well, actually, no, I live in Westmeath now, not Dublin. Sorry, but you're close enough in that line to me. So I was just thinking, as I said, just going through the little hamster, just thinking there that it could be a little experiment there to try out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll definitely try that. And I've got a singing microphone and a guitar amp. I could put the singer's microphone inside the box and connect it to a guitar amp.
Sure. I would start just by installing like Kieran said, and very well. I didn't remember. I didn't thought of that. You should install an app on your phone to tune guitars, and just put the phone on the box and see what note comes out.
Yeah.
That's relatively easy to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try that. I mean, I've kind of been stuck with the idea that it's kind of an ethereal sound, because when I hear the electro hums, it's not something that other people can hear, and it kind of, it's almost like it comes from behind my ear, if I'm standing near to a.
It's because your brain is, it's not your brain. Your skull shape is what allows you to hear it.
Right.
So you hear it from behind because it's your skull that is giving you the sound with somehow bouncing inside or something. I don't know, because I don't have a brain. I'm completely hollow. But the other thing I would suggest you is, if you find a way to increase or potentiate that vibration, you put a small basin with a little bit of water, and you should film it.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll do that too. Please. Film.
So
we're over the same side of the world, lads. Maybe we should touch base with each other.
Right.
Yeah, that would be good. Because you can sort of communicate a lot more info quickly, can't you? With when you're sort of in the same place. What was just came to mind was when the EMF humming, which is like the Orgone humming, that kind of there's another sound, a separate sound, which is the deep rumble, which
that's the resonance.
Well, that seems to come from underground. That's why I thought it was the rumbling of ships in the Mersey, because I was convinced that. In fact, I didn't even connect it to the box until someone came in. And
do you experience that? Do you experience that outside when you are in the fields?
No. The humming that I heard in the stone circle.
No. The other sound.
The deep rumble I've only ever heard next to the box.
You have been to megalithic sites, churches?
Yeah.
Nothing?
Not that rumble. I hear the EMF hum in megalithic sites, like a zzzz, but the rumble that I've been hearing is sounds like a ship going through water, and I'm only a couple of miles from the Mersey here, so I thought it was ships.
Could you build a manageable small box like that?
Yeah, I've got smaller ones inside it, because I tried to copy like Reich had an Orgone room, and the Ark of the Covenant was stored in an Orgone room, and James DeMeo had one.
So let me suggest one thing for your holidays. Take one of the small boxes and go and visit St. Michael's Line. That shouldn't be far from you.
Yeah.
And there's a church. Let me see in my database. By the way, go on, Kerry. I'm going to look for the file. Go on.
Sure.
I was just going to say, Leon, did you ever practice grounding, like get walk barefoot in these sites as well? Because it's something like I do it myself. There's actually, I'm only up the road, so Ursnach is the centre of Ireland, and that's meant to be the spiritual centre of Ireland. But there's a couple of places now, lads. Headless, Nick and Ricardo might have seen this. I'm not too sure about you, Richard, but the Clonmacnoise and Clontuskert are two schools, old schools or abbeys and churches of Ireland. And I've experienced, it was the first time I was actually on Tuskert. I walked barefoot and kind of like in this like little green area, like a little cloister. I felt like something came over me, and I was like, "Whoa!" And I was like, "That was weird." You know what I mean? But I was just thinking, like, did you ever try any of that stuff yourself? Like, it says you, like the way I see it is, it's like I think of this in like electrical terms. Electricity always wants to go to ground. It's dissipate to the massive earth. So I always try to walk barefoot because we are energetic beings within ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that one of the hummings got less is I've started walking barefoot on the beach and doing cold water swimming. Like it was the electro symptoms were getting really bad. I was getting it flared up last year, and I was getting quite worried. So so I started doing cold water swimming a few months back. And that involves walking barefoot too. Well, I do. Some people put those socks on to go like the scuba diving shoes, but I just go barefoot in the trunks, and that's been helping tremendously. So since I've got the electro under control, that I can now, if I sit by the box, if I can hear the hum, if I tune into it, if I sit by the box and imagine a pyramid, then the humming stays the same or increases. But if I imagine a sphere, the humming stops. So that's how I think I might be able to tell the difference between the EMF humming and the Orgone humming. But
you're tuning your own radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can I just share a screen?
Nick?
Sure, yeah. Not a problem.
Does this share my whole screen? How does this work?
Yeah, you go down to the bottom, go on present.
Your computer. Oh, I have to upload it.
Is it a picture or a website?
No, it's I was trying to share the images that I have opened.
Yeah, I know if it's like a photo or something, you have to leave it open and then click over to StreamYard, and it will see that the image is there. If it's a website, you could go to.
No. It's a file on my computer that I have open in the picture viewer or whatever it is.
Oh yeah. You'll have to you have to leave the picture open. You can't minimize it, and then switch over to StreamYard, and then click on present, and then go to like the window option, and you should see the photo there.
Share screen. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Stupid of me.
It's all right. No, it's if you haven't used StreamYard, you have to figure it out. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the spine of Albion that goes. I'm not sure where you live, but it goes from here to here.
Not far.
Okay. So you see this bit here?
Yeah.
That's where the radioactive small stone circles are.
Right,
okay.
Brilliant. Yeah, that is Cornwall.
Okay, so I would suggest you go to this particular church on this line. Let me open the church, just a second. Okay, this is the church. Now, tell me it's a coincidence that not only this church is crossed by two telluric energy lines, okay, but the stone basins were placed offset just to be exact on where the line crosses.
Gosh, yeah, that they definitely do, didn't they?
Okay, so I would suggest you go here with your box.
I can take a small box from inside it because there's 12 devices inside that box or thereabouts. So I could just pick one up and take it with me.
You guys got like Russian dolls of Orgone boxes.
Yeah,
I'm not presenting anymore, right?
Yep, you're good.
I'm not presenting anymore, right?
I had a quick confirmation for you, Leon.
I can pull it back up if you want to show something else.
No. I just want to make sure if it stopped.
Okay.
So I saw experiments having to do with a vacuum chamber and just regular old tubes, right? Sort of like a cloudbuster. So what they did is they took a bundle of straws, together with just a rubber band, and then they put something over the back of it, just like a cardboard piece, right over the back of the straws, and they aimed it at a vacuum tube with a piece of metal that was hanging inside there. And just by moving the tubes in front of the vacuum tube that they had this little piece of metal hanging from, the metal started to spin. So it's almost like the tubular shape of these straws has some sort of etheric effect in a vacuum environment that's able to change something in the air.
Tubes are really strong. The tubes are one of the strongest technologies, because just like half a dozen steel tubes on a truck. Well, like James DeMeo, he changed the weather across the whole of Eastern Africa just with two or three cloudbusters in Eritrea. So the tubes are incredibly powerful. I'd like to add that study to my Orgone bibliography.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. I'm trying to gather all the cloud busting studies, all the orgone accumulating studies, all the ones that have been published in either online or on journals. So I'll add that to the cloud busting study.
Vacuum environments are really interesting because you can see these energetic effects taking place when there's no supposed atmosphere that it's affecting on the inside.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, the doorbusters, well, there's the space gun, which is a cloud buster with some radioactively charged material placed near it. Well, orgone treated radioactive material placed near a cloudbuster changes it into shooting energy rather than pulling energy from the environment. The tubes are massively powerful, and even down to, I think you can affect spirit with it. Like I gave an orgone tube to a shaman, and just everything went crazy around her. Sort of electronic gates started behaving bizarrely. She got locked in a college library because all the electronics went haywire. And then some electronics in a shop went strange, and just her and the energy charge in her flat. She kept the tube for a while, and the energy charge became overwhelming. Especially for it was a somewhat sexualizing energy, but it was overwhelming. So that ties in a bit to who's that Israeli kind of shaman guy.
Guys, we could all be billionaires if we start to use Orgone Viagra. I mean, we just got to sell that.
Yuri Geller is here.
Yuri Geller, that's it.
Yeah.
Because Yuri Geller can increase Geiger counts just at will. And I think they dismissed it as being radioactive because they said, oh, he doesn't affect electroscopes. But orgone affects electroscopes differently to the Geiger counters. So if Yuri Geller can increase Geiger counts at will, I reckon he's probably increasing the Orgone field, which is a kind of radioactivity, although it's a more biologically friendly radioactivity than straight nuclear radiation.
I had some questions on Orgone. Have you ever hooked an Orgone generator up to a coil?
I've not. I've put spirals near because of the Russian research where the Russians made spiraling orgone accumulators, or that they call it torsion energy in Russia. And they'd opened up portals with spiraling orgone accumulators that they sat people in, and they made orgone tubes that they put people in to increase their psychic powers. And I thought I'd experiment with spirals, but I had to stop because each time I put a large metal spiral by the Oronor box, we got attacked at night. Like it seemed to open up a kind of unguarded portal, and the people and myself and sort of one other person in the house, we'd have like things jump into our dreams and attack us. So I gave up on the spirals.
Leon, I had a really bad idea. A really bad
Yeah.
What you do is you hook up the Oronor spiral, and then you use that as an antenna for a spirit box. You know those boxes that pick up the spirit energy and have the radios transmit the voices. You put the two of those together, you've got an automatic sort of paranormal portal that you're kind of opening up right there. Hey guys,
Well, that would be
experiment. Just keep it out of the house. Go somewhere else when you're doing this stuff.
So what would that be? A spiral antenna,
Right, for the
and then
spirit box.
hooked up to is a spirit box where the radio detunes itself to make
fragmented messages.
Yeah, it will go like scan
Yeah.
forwards or backwards and like AM or FM. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, don't do it near your house. That's
Right,
all I'm saying.
right.
Get away from your house when you're doing this, because you never know what's going to be coming through that thing.
Yeah. So I was wanting to add, just from a more historical perspective, when you go back to the ancient Myrrh, which were said to be the first circle builders, and then you get into the red-headed shepherds coming into Egypt and overthrowing Osiris and basically being credited with building the pyramids, and then you get into just what is it, the Gibble or the Giblamites, that were the temple builders for Solomon's temple, that specialized in this 8-tone carving. They basically transitioned into the Dionysians, and these were the sacred temple builders that were basically using these tune frequencies, using these knowing the qualities of these rocks, and bringing and creating the amphitheaters where you could whisper and it would still be the same level, and building these outdoor spaces, and basically they maintained a monopoly through the cult action of these various mystery schools, per se, and that leads us right up into Fulcanelli and the mysteries of the cathedrals and the cymatics and tuning. When you have the stained glass windows that are basically telling you what the frequency of the temple itself is. So you have this long historical monopoly going back tens of thousands of years, potentially. That have kept this information secret and passed
hidden in
it
plain
on.
sight.
Yeah, hidden in plain sight, exactly.
One of the reasons why I had
Robby,
everybody on is so that I could recruit you. I want you in my army. So there's a site at the Amenemhat III at Hawara Pyramid, which is a labyrinth in Egypt that has been reported all the way back to all of these ancient philosophers that they've yet to uncover. And I think this is the place where we can find the secrets of cymatics, the secrets of how they did this stuff, because this is where they brought people like Pythagoras and Plato and put them inside of
and
these,
initiated them.
and initiated them.
Yes.
And there's been no sort of major attention. Now that we've got the attention going on with the second pyramid in Egypt and all of these things that are kind of dubious, I don't believe that, maybe a 6,000 foot shaft is a bit much. They might be getting some other readings. I think it's probably electromagnetic. But we do know that this place exists.
Right.
So if we want to get any sort of attention going on this site, this is the place where they'd be transmitting this kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
And if we get to a place where we can actually get excavations, I would be thrilled beyond belief, because this is the one that has it. Now, there could be a lot of water damage and everything else, but I believe that the dimensions of this thing alone would reveal so many secrets having to do with this frequency and this generation of electrical energy. I think this is the place. So if you guys get a chance, look up the Labyrinth of Egypt at Hawara, and you will find the importance of this thing.
Yeah,
How do you spell that? Harara.
Yeah, they just did LiDAR scans of it and found this massive underground complex that I have a Herodotus quote here. He says that all the works and buildings of the Greeks put together would certainly be inferior to this labyrinth as regards to labor and expense. In his opinion, the building of this labyrinth had outdone even the Great Pyramid itself. This underground palace had 12 covered courts, 6 each in the north and the south of Egypt, with one wall encompassing the whole. There were 2 sorts of rooms, one above and the other below ground, 1,500 of each sort, or 3,000 in all. And Herodotus was allowed to pass through the upper rooms only, as the lower rooms were forbidden and used only by the priests and the pharaohs. And they were and it was said that this was a cyclopean structure that was made of solid limestone that was intricately carved throughout. It had thousands and thousands of rooms, and we know there was at least 2 levels. So, and it was described as, when you would stand above it, that it would be a field of stone, and everything was submerged, essentially in the underworld there in Egypt. And they just found this, that's been talked about by the ancient philosophers, just here within the last week. So,
but we cannot go on, Ron.
Yeah.
So there's just the battle of the good guys here, lads. So Robby, and even Headless, and you know about this book, Ricardo, but there's a book called Irish Wisdom in the Pyramids, and that actually talks about the priest kings. Do you know about that book?
No.
Yeah, you should check it out, because I was in Egypt in May last year, and what happened was I read it. Now, I'm sick I didn't read it before, because it confirms a lot of the other stuff I look at in regards to Irish migrations. It kind of goes into the travel to the Americas and stuff like that. But the last page, so with my pyramid theory, it was the point cone, or was the essentially the frequency drive within the pyramid, right? But the last page of that book was actually what made me publish my theory online, and it more or less says that the ancient priests of Isa, they were psycho-spiritual masters, essentially, and it's possible that it was them they were the shepherd kings that went into Egypt. Right. And then what you're describing there about the labyrinth, right? So I actually have a couple of pictures here from each trip to Egypt. I just kind of quickly dive through them, but like, you 100%, it's not only the Giza plateau that has like been blocks not put down to. Like, I was actually underground into these tunnels. But when I went to Luxor, it was the same thing. It was the Valley of the Kings, and same thing. Like, you can actually walk like core down into these tunnels if you want. And this I would actually relate to what that new theory that's out. Like, that is interesting. Like, but it like, to me, it all requires, like, I'm sure we're all of the opinion, it requires more research, because it's so complex. Like, there's way more to the story, but there absolutely was serious engineering going on behind that. But I'd almost be careful as to who the authorities are releasing it. You know, like they've probably known about it the whole time, and they're drip feeding the information to the general public now. You know, But sorry, Ricardo, for jumping in ahead of you.
No, not at all. I was just going to say that regarding these new scans that have several problems, as most people have seen in the yesterday's show.
Yeah.
What bothers me the most is none of this is new.
Right.
There was a massive team that, against the authorities, scaled the pyramids every single night until they find the stone that is about the 7th row from the top, if I'm not mistaken. But I shared the papers many times. And so they activated the entrance by sound. They knew it was by sound, so they used a conjunction of words until they finally found something that worked. So the stone receded. They entered into the stairway. They took hours on end to get to the bottom in the darkness. And they went there again because they hadn't food or water. They didn't thought they would find it such a vast extent to reach the bottom. And the second time, they finally, after being in the bottom, they crossed the first door and they found many chambers with many artifacts, with many books and so on. They took 18,000 photographs in microfilm that were recorded in microfilm. And after they finished all this, they were captured by American forces where they were. 2 of the members were killed. Everything they had was taken away, and the only thing we have today is the record of the survivors that explain what they have done and what they had, and this small booklet that they created. It's called the stairway of the pyramid or something like that. So nothing of this is new. And we just have to remember Solon the Elder, when he was with Sontius of Sais in Sais, and he told him, let's go to the House of Records that is beneath the temple.
Right.
So it doesn't specify the temple. The funny thing is there was only one massive temple on Sais at that time. So they would knew exactly where to go and look for that chamber of records. But it's not one chamber of records. There are multiple chamber of records, not just one, because they copied everything meticulously. For instance, in like Alexandria, every boat that comes to the port, it was looked for manuscripts. They were confiscated, and they could only depart again once the manuscripts were returned to them after they've been copied by the Library of Alexandria. Right. And so I think the major problem with these new studies that they keep saying they will publish, let's see if they do. I happen to, one of the languages that I happen to understand is Italian, so I listened to everything they had to say. And it's like hearing a guy that is going to speak about a topic for an hour and he touches 30 seconds. Goes round and round and round and round and round and round and explains absolutely nothing.
Platitudes.
Just that is fantastic and great and brutal and so on. But
Ricardo,
one of the points...
If I could back you up real quick. So this is an image of a radio...
I published this study many times, yes.
Right. So this is the Great Pyramid, and these are the electromagnetic changes in it. Now, if you notice, this looks a whole lot like the study that they just recently did on that other pyramid. So is it the electromagnetic radiation they're picking up, or is it a chamber? Because I think it might be electromagnetic radiation, and they just didn't know what they were looking at. That's my...
This appears only in 2 studies, a Russian one from the 70s and this one. And the thing is, I don't think they even are looking at this. What I think is happening is that they gather a bunch of data with experimental processes and then gave it to a model. And that's the problem when people start talking about models, that the problems start. Let's just look at the global warming. The models gave the results that they were induced to give. So if you tell them that you have to exponentiate 400% on CO2, it's obviously that they will say that CO2 is the worst thing that can happen, while they forget that everything lives off CO2 because the trees eat CO2. And if we with our cars have ever done anything to the environment was to green it, because the CO2 that we are producing has been increasing the forests worldwide. The green area has been increasing because of our 0.6% of anthropomorphic increase in CO2. Of course, there are serious gases that are dangerous, but 99.9% came from industry, not from the common citizen. And it has nothing to do with CO2. CO2 should be by now double than it is. And if it was, the agricultural production would triple, quadruplicate, because plants feed on dioxide carbon. That's why there are greenhouses that feed 1,600,000 parts per unit of CO2 to the production or agricultural production, so that they grow more. But the ancients didn't do that. The ancients used electroculture. And that's what also the Menhirs do, what the Dolmens do, what these megalithic sites do. They also create an electroculture effect on the lands around it.
And with that, I was going to say, we have these numerous cases over and over where they've taken seeds into these chambers, and the aspect of the viability of the seed increases in regard to the grow ratio.
More than record and many times registered in academic papers that went peer reviewed. Right. It's just one of those things that is proven. It's just not explicitly shown, and most of the time is behind a paywall. You go and you can only read the abstract because the paper is behind a paywall. Luckily, I can go around most paywalls, but sometimes it's just impossible.
That ties over with the Orgone research too, because the Orgone accumulators have a similar effect on plant growth, which is if people want to go.
Oh, your dog is charging.
Yeah, if you charge seeds or plants, it boosts their plant growth, similar to how a pyramid does. I think a pyramid is like a type of Orgone accumulator in many ways. I suspect that the Hebrews...
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be made of stone.
No, it doesn't. You can.
So the pyramid has another function. That includes that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're multifunctional. Just like you can do like I've discovered that Oronor creates a sound. Like even Reich didn't know that, and it's all multifunctional. We're just scratching the surface with each device, really. But I think the ancients who built these stone structures, that they knew more about subtle energy than like we do now.
Sure.
Is my guess.
I have a book by Harold Aspen that I'm not sure if you know. That it's called.
It rings a bell, that name.
Yeah, it is called Modern Aether Science from 1972, and he's shown through his tests in this book that the pyramid shape doesn't need to be made of anything specific, because even teepees from the Indians create the effect. It's just the like it's been said, it is the morphogenetic field is affected by the triangular shape somehow.
Yeah. They used to say that the dunce hat that they would put on the kids and put them in the corner was to direct the energies of the universe to make them smarter.
Yeah.
We can go back. We can go back to that image that I just showed. It's the same idea. The electromagnetic lensing effect of a pyramid is visible. Now, I've noticed, because I do aura viewing of plants and trees and all sorts of stuff like that. I've noticed that while I'm doing aura viewing, I'll also catch in my line of vision signs on the side of the road that actually have sort of a pyramid-shaped energy field coming off of them while I'm, aura viewing other things. And this sort of dark pyramid-shaped energy that comes off of regular old signs is going directly into the ground. So anything that you're using to sort of deform the electromagnetic energy comes off of it in a pyramid shape. So when you're using that pyramid shape, it directly impacts the morphogenetic fields, like you were just saying, because basically, as we impact the land takes that energy into it. As we name these places, those names and those places start to change based off of the energy we're putting into them.
Yeah, I think we need, and this is for Kieran. I think we should think about these massive structures like the pyramids. Not only have a multiple purpose, they also have a vital purpose to the earth itself. We just have to think that these places were built after mega cataclysms. And the megalithic culture was lost after a mega cataclysm, for instance, around 4000 BC. If you read my paper about it, some say it's 3600, others say 3200. I say 4000 BC because it's the exact period where we see the transition between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. And what I think killed the megalithic culture and power was the fact that when the water flooded the land, and this is not Younger Dryas, this is 4000 BC, this is Burckle Crater and the other, the two impacts in the Atlantic with one impact in the, two impacts in the Pacific and one impact in the Atlantic. That is also never mentioned. And I think the water that was thrown into land, that is proven by the fact that we have massive canyons where the land meets the sea that are now underwater, that could not be made unless there was no water, because water can create canyons in the water, but they are very small. For the size, for instance, every one of you must have seen the record of the highest wave in Nazaré in Portugal, 30 meters wave, the guy surfing, win the record. That's because there's a Nazaré Canyon that was produced by the massive amounts of water coming from land and returning to the sea, and excavated all that area, created that canyon. So when the land was flooded with water, whatever power that was concentrated in the crystal matrix of the bedrock started to lose energy because there was water everywhere. So the energy spread everywhere. So the megalithic sites lost their power because the energy was completely spread instead of focus on nodes.
The water's above and water below in the Bible.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when they lost this energy, what happens? They are invaded. Iberia lost 96% of the males, 96%. So the only people that survived and keep surviving still untouched is the Baskans, because they were there 7,000 years ago, 7,000 BC ago already. They are still there. They are the only unconquered people on Earth, ever. So they didn't lost the technology for some reason.
Now,
because,
are the Basque the Azorian Islands?
No.
this
These
is
are
Spain.
Portuguese.
Further kind of north in Spain, yeah.
My friend
Okay,
Karine,
gotcha. Yeah.
my friend Karine Atlas that I do spaces with, it comes from the Basque region. That's one of the language she speaks.
Yeah, he's the oldest continuous lineage of people in existence. So, sorry?
No, I was just saying there's a connection. There's a connection with the Irish. It's the Irish are Western Irish are connected to the Basque as well. My family come from the West as well. But what the Irish are known as is Iberians as well. So they came up from Spain, but Iberia, you know. But even in relation to what you were saying, Ricardo, about the megalithic structures, there's a lot of I do talk about a lot about Irish mythology on my channel as well. But there was the two-a-day Danan were all about that as well. Is that the energy and stuff like that? There was when the Milesians who are the modern Gaels, now they're all related at the going back and forth, but the Milesians were cast away from Kerry, I think it was, in southwest Ireland, and it was magic that they had. It was magic, but it was probably like natural energy that they were able to use. But then even that event that you were talking about, Ricardo, there's the Starega slides. Now I have to remember this now. I remember there was an event 8,000 years ago, and that was possibly the last event that properly sank Doggerland region. But then there was another event, like almost like an aftershock a couple of thousand years later. So that could also affect those structures as well. Like the thing is like as we all know here, truth is stranger than fiction. Like, you know what I mean? It's crazy. You know, it's crazy. But sorry, you're interrupting there again. Sorry.
No. So as I was saying, we have this example that how could these sites do what we read in the papers? For instance, for Iberia, we see that they lived, and then funny enough, I found out that this happened not only in Iberia, but also what shocked me the most was in summer. So we have France, England, and the Iberia places where for at least until the Bronze Age started, there are not one single record of a weapon. Which this means is that no single tool could be found whose only purpose is to kill another human being. So they have arrows and spears, but that was for hunting too. So for killing another human being, there's not even in summer, there is nothing of that kind until 4000 BC.
You're talking about the Bell-Beakers, right? The Bell-Beaker Society?
No, these are many societies that apparently live in an idyllical world within the megalithic structures. Those that knew the megalithic structures lived in an idyllic world where there was peace and no one could invade them. So this leads to the question how barbarians wouldn't go through those people and conquer them. It's very simple, because the same technology that healed the land, the same technology that increased production of agriculture, the same technology that allowed the animals to be tamed and easily to kill for food, that made these people that have houses, as we see all around, that there is no status, social status. Everyone lived in exactly the same conditions, and there's only a religious leader or a shaman or whatever, no leaders. And what happens when the megalithic culture ends? They are completely invaded, completely destroyed. And my question is, why weren't they invaded? So when we look into into the records of history, what we find is places like the Groparello Castle. The Groparello Castle is an interesting structure that is several thousand years old. It was reused in Roman times. And what did the Romans did there? They found out the technology that allowed them to conquer any army. So they found an hypogeum. There is a small room underground, carved on bedrock, on a place that has an energetic node, and they built a tower on top of it to create some kind of resonance. So this castle is known today on the historical records for being unconquered for 600 years, while there was constant and active attempts to conquer that very same castle. There are two families in war, and the ones that had the castle for 600 years were never invaded and never conquered, although many armies tried to take it. What they found when the Steve Marshall, one of the directors of the Archaeoacoustic Studies or Council, what he found there is that the site produced concentrated or compressed waves around 4 hertz that causes that sensation of fear, hallucination, loss of limb control, all of that the Romans were very interested in. Even if you look at Baalbek, you find that they tried to build such a tower that is now demolished, but the tower, you know that tower was there. The problem is they didn't know about how to find the nodes, so they could only use the sites that were being used by the ancestors that had found those nodes and build upon that. So they quit the idea of using this technology on the battlefields because they had to have an energetic node and then build the structure to create it. So it's impractical.
Ricardo, it's important to note, though, that Baalbek was destroyed by a mysterious kind of explosion or something. They've got, bodies that seem to be, mummified in place.
Yeah, and the tower is destroyed. So it could have been a misuse of the tower by those that took it or something like that. We have a fantastic story about the ancient city of Gore. Okay, so the ancient city of Gore is a city that is built on a massive valley in Arab territory in Africa, and it has only a dirt. It's 2 kilometers wide. 1 kilometer wide. It has just a small bank of dirt in its boundaries, so no walls, no nothing. And we have this story of Alexander the Great that arrived at the valley, ordered his armies to attack the city, and none of them could get close to the city. They started killing each other. They went in despair. They raping their clothes, attacking one another. He tried twice, and then he understood what he was facing. So because he couldn't conquer it, he decided to break a dam that safeguarded the valley, and he flooded the valley under more than 3 meters of water. So he flooded the whole thing. This was found 600 years later by a small sheik that decided to once again rebuild the dam. The water ran away, and he took the city for his own. He should be working still, because in a matter of 2 years, he conquered 2/3 of the country. So, and no one could touch him. It's one of those moments in history that someone with a very small army all of a sudden takes hold of a lot of land in the territory. And then we have the story of Preston John, that is a mythological figure from the Middle Ages, that was supposed to have a country that was built by the Tartars. The Tartars were his workforce, to whom he gave the technology. And they were able to build structures like the cathedrals, like these towers to protect cities. And so what Alexander the Great wanted from Preston John is, in the record, there appears something mentioned that Alexander the John commissioned Preston John to build towers where today you find the Wall of China. And these towers, the purpose of these towers was to keep the magical and terrible creatures of the land of Gog and Magog and the giants outside of his territory, without having to have an army there. So on the ruins of those towers is where we today would find the Wall of China, because they didn't have the technology, so they just made a massive wall. Although the wall is kind of strange because the barriers are onto the inside instead of the outside, but that's another question. Right. But these are the stories involve this kind of technology being used in the past. So and this is why I think that these people were decimated and invaded precisely at that point after this cataclysm, because their power was terminated. They didn't have the megalithic sites anymore to work for them.
Would that tie in at all with there's an Orgone researcher called James DeMeo, and he tried to do a cloud busting PhD and he got stopped. So he did an anthropological study into the origins of human violence called Saharasia, and he reckons something quite similar with a similar time, that before 4000 BC, that there was mainly matriarchal societies globally, and then a desert occurred across the Sahara all the way to China, and then out of that desert you got warring tribes that invaded the matriarchal cultures and destroyed them. But his rough time scale for that is about 4000 BC. I think that process started, he reckoned.
Okay, I'm now going to get outside of academic notions and a little bit into the fantastic.
Well, can I got something real quick. So
Go on.
This is the Bell Beaker Society, which came out in around 2450 BC, right? That's all of Europe. That's the Bell Beaker Society just at the beginning of the Bronze Age. And these are the people who just got out of the megalithic business. Now, we're talking about a massive distribution all the way across, no borders in Europe, of this Bell Beaker Society before the rise of these empires. So, to sort of indicate that's not really a warlike place if they're all sort of experiencing the same kind of culture.
It was a paradise, yeah.
Yeah, that's what DeMeo said around that time. They had amazing cultures. Like,
they didn't have any written records, right? So the issue is
they didn't need to. They have the crystals.
They could be psychic. They could be having telepathic experiences.
Do you think it's so hard for a culture that has this kind of sophistication and knowledge scientific knowledge, whatever science would want to call it, but it was scientific knowledge for them. These alignments, these astronomical alignments that take thousands of years to understand by observation. So if they didn't create a writing style, is because either we don't find it because some materials are perishable, or
You don't want us to know.
or they didn't need it. Look, you didn't need a cell phone before cell phones existed, and now you cannot do anything without it. It's just a matter of social perception. If you don't need writing because you have a system where you go and experience from time to time in a ceremony the voices of the ancestors and the knowledge of the ancestors, and imprint new knowledge into the structures, and you see the structures affecting the wildlife, affecting agriculture, you reach a point after 7,000 years of peace, after the Younger Dryas settle down, those 7,000 years of peace, do you think they will keep the knowledge exactly as they began it? They reached to a point that most of the people didn't even know how it worked or if it was working. They were just enjoying the magic of the thing. There will be just a few of them that know how that happens, that keep that knowledge. But most of them, after 7,000 years, people, it just becomes every day.
To me,
That's how
it
it
evokes.
is.
To me, it evokes the myths of the golden age of mankind, because they
It
always
is.
talk about that. Where
It is.
Kronos is ruling, and all the Titans are there, and this is where man doesn't die. He goes into the underworld and comes back renewed every single day.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and also, how much could this have to do with the changing frequency of the Earth itself?
Absolutely.
It can. Look, this is what I'm about to say. In my fantastic perception of things, I think that, first of all, humans are the only non-natural element existing. I wouldn't say in the universe, but I will reduce that to the Earth. Okay? I don't think we are natural at all. So macroevolution doesn't exist, no matter how much they want to give us that notion. It doesn't exist. There are some animals that jump, trade gender, that can seem to have changed species, but they are as singular as an ornithorync or whatever, platypus. That's how we call it in English, a platypus, right?
Platypus.
So it's a beaver with a duck's head and a castor tail. So those things happen in nature.
And poisonous. They're the only
And poisonous.
poisonous.
And lay
And
eggs.
poisonous. Okay.
And lay eggs.
So nature can produce some strange things. The thing is, it makes no sense for humans to exist because we don't belong in nature. We don't. We have to struggle to
Very
live in
weird
nature.
creature, that's true.
We have to struggle
we're-
to live in nature. Yeah. So what I came up from my religious studies, from my mythological studies, from legends and history and myths and so on, is that it seems that this has been, as Tolkien described, between the elves and Melkor. This is the long defeat. So you had two types of beings here, superior beings, let's call it that, on Earth. The story goes beyond that, but no matter. So we have what I call the teachers, and we have what I call the slavers. If you go to Angkor Wat, you find a typical slave site. That is massive agricultural fields to sustain massive amounts of people that make no sense for such a small structure. Those control the power to control the people. And then you have the teachers like Machu Picchu, where you find that everyone lived in the same house, no different of statues, small agricultural just for the population there is in there, and all share the same kind of life. This would be a hidden place of the teachers that somehow appeared in here and there and teach the people to do this and teach the people to do that. That seems like alien, because magic is just a technology that we don't understand. That's all that magic is a technology that we still don't understand. It's like calling chaos. Chaos is not chaos. Chaos is a level of organization that we haven't understood yet, but it's more organized than what we have because it works, because everything comes from chaos. If you go to the molecular level, to the atom level, to the neutron level, you find complete chaos, and everything that is organized that we can see comes from that chaos. This is just a level of organization that we just don't understand, and we just dismiss it and say, oh, it is chaos. Chaos is extraordinarily organized in itself. We just don't understand it. So I think
Morphogenic fields.
Morphogenic fields. Yeah, it's like, for instance, in my book Stardust, I have two books. One is The Resonant Earth, that explains from A to Z with a vast appendix explaining all the terms, and then a vast bibliography so people can go and check everything that is mentioned. And I explain everything, how sound was used in conjunction to create the effects that we can still produce today on megalithic sites. But I have one called The Stardust, where I go deep into consciousness, to reality, and my conclusions on this is that most people are focused because of the pressure of the society, of this culture of me, 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 me. They keep saying you, your clothes, your music, your this, and you find out that the you is the we, because everyone is listening to the same thing and sharing the same thing, and everyone is feeling integrated, and everything seems to be experiencing the same mediocrity.
Identity, politics, yeah.
Exactly. So we are reduced to the 5% of residual consciousness that the brain can sustain. But we are neglecting the 95% that are real we, that are not in the body. You are not supposed to find the guy that is making the radio show on the radio. He is not there. The radio is a transmitter, and that's exactly what our brain does. Our brain is just the field connection, the neuron connection, the atomic connection that produces a magnetic field that links us directly to our true self that lives in the to the morphogenetic field that is around us. It's like a digital signature. It's an energy signature that connects us to this body. I even recently read recent study saying this, I'm sorry if I'm going to offend someone, that says that it is now scientifically proven that any type of semen that a woman gets during her sexual life will have an impact on her embryo. So the parentage thing that we see in old societies that were shared somehow to create better results, it might translate that they understand this, because imagine those guys that have children that doesn't look like them. She could have been getting the semen that even goes into the brain. They found semen from relations years ago, lodged in the brain of the woman that they tested. So
Ricardo, that actually plays directly into Orgone, because Orgone, Rife believed that was the energy produced during orgasm. And so the entire field of orgonomy is based off of the sexual fields. And I think that actually plays a large deal to do with why there were so many fertility cults. They're talking about that energy. They're talking about that life energy. And you see what they're obsessed with, all of their artwork.
And what have they transformed? What they have transformed those fertility rites into? What we see in satanic histories and orgies and all of that kind of stuff. So it's the same thing for a different purpose, but it's the same thing.
It's almost like the divine spark, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the fear of sexuality goes to, really, because the sexuality takes you to the divine consciousness. So
it's a state of bliss.
Yeah. That's how Reich how he discovered orgone energy. But the starting point of it was seeing that the orgasm function was disturbed in working class people in Vienna, and Freud didn't really have a handle on it, and so Reich looked at character analysis. He introduced that into psychotherapy based on the orgasm disturbance of working class Viennese. But then they departed because Freud thought that there wasn't originally he thought there was a real subtle energy that powered the sexual drives. But then he made it psychic only because he knew he'd get into trouble. And Reich followed that through and then coordinated it with emotions, like emotions that flow from your core outwards are pleasurable, and energy flowing from your periphery to the core, you perceive as anxiety, and that there's an electrical change with that too. But then he got to the microchloridians that you mentioned earlier, Ricardo. There's a whole, there's just a huge chunk of biology that's completely missing.
Absolutely.
Mainstream. There's like a third of biology goes from inanimate matter to these microchloridians or bions, and then mainstream biology only takes up at that point. But sexuality led to the discovery of orgone energy.
Well, I can certainly tell you that in some experiments, this sounds weird, but in some experiences, the women that are already their frequency is already in tuned to capture this kind of energies. When they're forced is a wrong word, but when they are made to enter in the cycle of orgasms, it reaches to a point that something clicks in the brain, and for instance, they start speaking a completely different language. For instance, and so when I heard this, I connected immediately to the fact that you see in Egypt statues with phallus, where they have sex with the phallus that is made of stone. The stone is made of granite, is made of crystal, that is embedded in the site that it was produced in. So some kind of energy could be produced and be internally affected, many things. But the other thing is, you see that, for instance, in Greece.
Bible as well.
Yeah, in Greece and Rome.
They melt down. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have sex statues in the Bible.
It's in the Oracle of Delphi, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Herm, they used to make the Herm stones that had the phallus on them.
Yeah.
That would be used for ritual purposes, per se.
Yeah.
And to beat people with. You can't forget that they would use the thing like a baseball bat, so if they had any intruders, boom!
The carrot and the stick.
Right?
Yeah. I can't resist to make a question to Leon. Does your phone charge wirelessly?
No.
Have you put a wireless charging phone on the box?
A wireless charger or just a...
No. But my phone, for instance, is old, but it doesn't need to be connected. I can put it on top of a small box or whatever it is, and it charges by the field that the box generates.
Right. No, I don't have one of those.
No, so you should see if any of your friends have one of those and see if it charges when it's placed on top of the box. Just curious.
Right.
Yeah, I think it might do. I've put capacitors in when I was doing the original Oronor experiments.
Because then you truly become a millionaire.
Yeah. Right.
Ronnie and Leon, you guys got to get together, dude. I want to see the things you build together. This is going to be awesome.
Well, actually, can I jump in there for a second, lads, and present the experiment I found? Now, with Ricardo, Headless, and Nick, you've probably seen this. So I'm just going to present here for a second. Share screen. That was the experiment we were talking about. Was talking about at the start of the chat there. So if you scroll down there, it says that it's a wild idea has been proposed to generate electric power from Earth's rotation with the help of magnetic fields. So it says a new research has presented experimental evidence confirming the previously theorized method to generate electricity from Earth's magnetic field. So scroll down a bit further, it says the idea faced skepticism because conventional physics suggests it wasn't possible. But essentially, this would be a good idea for Leon there to have a look at, because more or less the experiment setup was what we were describing. So I described the pyramid as essentially what this is it's aligned to Earth's, it's aligned to Earth's true north. But what happens is it's the magnetic field passing through the magnetic field passing through the coil that's actually picking up. If you scroll down there, Nick, you'll be able to see it. So if it goes down to experimental setup, so if you just go back up a wee bit, so that's the experiment setup there. So what it's saying is traditional proof suggests it was possible to generate electricity from Earth's magnetic field using a conductor rotating with the planet. So what it's saying is, so if you go to the experiment setup, the researchers positioned carefully the specialized cylinders. They aligned it to north-south orientation and specifically at a 57-degree angle. This precise positioning was crucial as it ensured that the cylinder was situated perpendicularly or at a 90-degree angle to Earth's rotational motion and the lines of force within the Earth's magnetic field. So this would actually relate to what myself and Ricardo were saying there earlier on. So Leon, when you're talking about moving your Orgone box, you should probably have a look at something similar to this. And then, like as it says, when myself, Headless, and Nick had our chat on the Pyramid Power 1, that's where my line of thinking was, is that when I could have came up with that theory, I couldn't apply that because I was thinking, it's like, it is possible because I'm thinking Earth is a generator. But without the help of AI, I wouldn't have been able to kind of come up with that. But it's something that angular, like all these angles and stuff like that, it's almost like sacred geometry, but it's within power generation. But like the way I thought about it was, is Earth's a generator, or Earth is the primary coil. So even what you're thinking there with your box and stuff like that, you should try and deploy that stuff yourself, Leon. Or even I'll beat you, I'll fly over and say, hell yeah, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I did one experiment where I moved an electrical meter within the Orgone field, and it increased the electrical charge and the magnetic charge. And there is a small increase in capacitance in electronic capacitors. If you put them inside the Orgone box, they charge up a little bit, but it's only millivolts. But if you move the device within the magnetic field, it seems to increase it somewhat. So I think there's something about movement within a magnetic field that would. So it's like the box would be a mini Earth. So I suspect that might be partly what Reich's Orgone motor was based on. I think he possibly used a radioactive material to increase the Orgone charge, and then started an electrical spin within the Orgone field, and then amplified it.
Do you guys know what this is?
No.
So this is what Ed Lead Skalnin called the infinite motion device. Right? And so what you do is you charge up these two coils with this 9-volt battery, right? And then that charge stays within the coils as long as the magnet is attached to the bottom.
Gosh.
Right? So it doesn't degrade in charge even after charging it up. So this thing is supposed to stay like this forever. I've seen them do experiments with it. He got a 6-month flash of light out of this these two coils. So there's things we're not considering about, you know, how these things are collected. Also, I wanted to include Ronnie, about the effect that you're talking about. It becomes real simple to picture when you've got two coils that are at the perfect angle to create more inductance. It's just a massive inductor of charge, you know?
And I was going to say that study you were showing as far as the Earth being the dynamo, being the engine, Nikola Tesla was very much trying to create a system of giving everyone free energy, and J.P. Morgan threw it in the Hudson River, you know, because they couldn't bill for it.
Yeah, but that's a lot of, like, Tesla was a lot of where I based that theory on. Was like, I looked at it and I was like, what was he doing? Like, does he like, energy's constantly there, like Earth's magnetic field, you got atmospheric electricity, then obviously the wider universe, the universe sings, it's like I always taught is think of everything as energy. It doesn't go anywhere, it just changes its state. You know what I mean? And then, as it says, I always say, Tesla always said is you have to find the secrets of the universe. You think of energy, frequency, and vibration. Right. But then you apply that to the likes of the pyramids. There was energy there. the frequency was the frequency drive, and then the vibration was the thermal expansion and contraction.
Right.
Massive system. That these people knew what was up, lads. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Reich thought of electricity as a side effect of the ether in a way, or the subtle energy. So he thought subtle energy was the primary force, and like pyramids and accumulators and all the subtle energy devices gather that, and then they convert that subtle energy into electrical effects. Well, that's one thing you can do with it. Like if you compress a subtle energy field, you get an electron. Henry Moray kind of did similar work. He had a radioactive radio that sort of one antenna went into the ground and one antenna went upwards.
So, I was just saying that the problem with Nikola Tesla was J.P. Morgan, of course, was the element that shut it down. But his problem for us not learning more from him is that he was a fantastic inventor, but he was terrible with money. And he made contracts with people that asked for him to build this and that, and he used the money for his own projects, and then he didn't make the projects for the other persons, and he started losing credibility. So his problem was not just JP Morgan, and the problem is he couldn't deal with money. He just couldn't. He was too obsessed with his own world, and he didn't have means to finance it, so he took risks.
But
Sorry?
Niagara.
He was a turbo autist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
he said he got his information from the Aether, so
right. But Niagara Falls here in upstate New York is all Tesla technology. He actually won that battle, so that's one of the few remaining, and that generates power for all of New York and New York City. So
yeah, that's the steam powered, isn't it? That's I can't remember the name of it. That's all steam powered, correct?
No,
it's
turbine.
Turbine, yeah, from the falls.
Oh, sorry,
From the
turbo.
water
Sorry.
falls,
it's kinetic energy. It's kinetic energy. Yeah.
Right.
The really messed up part is that they had to shut down most of the turbines. So it was producing way more power than they ever gave it credit for, and they just didn't need all that power. So those turbines are all still down, and it's like, okay, guys, why don't you just fire it up?
Fire those back up, yeah.
It's so obvious they don't want us to have cheaper energy. That is the issue. They're going to keep jacking it up.
It's a leverage tool.
Look, I have in my database a series of projects that all claim to produce free energy. They are schematized from beginning to end, but there is one that works. And it's as simple as placing a copper cylinder with a mesh and then an iron cylinder, and then bury it in the ground. Each one of these will generate 1 volt. So if you have a set of batteries that creates X volts, you just need the number of cylinders to keep those batteries constantly at that top. So there's people living in Arizona in the desert and in the highest ground that they feed all their houses through this system alone. It's expensive because the copper is expensive,
right?
But the rest of the things are not that expensive. And so they keep the batteries charged. So imagine if you have a battery that has 24 volts and you have 24 of these things in the ground, you cannot deplete the battery because it's constantly being supplied with the amount of power that it receives. So it's like a constant circuit of energy. So there's many ways to produce energy. For instance, there are scientific projects that produce ice from the sun, from just the light of the sun with a gigantic mirror, and somehow it produces ice. So most of the problem with science is that most of the beams that support it, that its foundation is built in assumptions that not all of them are correct, and we keep finding with these telescopes looking into space that after all we didn't understand Big Bang, we didn't understand how the galaxies evolve, we didn't understand anything, yet the narrative doesn't change. You have an island in the middle of the Atlantic that it's called the Azores, Terceira, that has megaliths. The megaliths were discovered almost 20 years ago, and still we say that it was the Portuguese that got there first and crossed the ocean first, when it's obvious that it has two levels of occupation. You have a megalithic occupation at least 4,000 years ago, which could reach to 8,000 years ago. And you have a Phoenician or Mediterranean crossing. They were going to the Americas for sure, because we find their anchors still on the beaches. And when they try to say, no, this is just stones, they are not anchors. All right, so let's measure the circle from which the cable passes. Every single one had 14 centimeters hole. Every single one.
Every single one.
Florida has so many of these things.
Anchors,
they
yeah.
stack them up outside of golf courses. Those are indigenous anchors that are for these ships, and they say, no, look, they're just too big. They didn't have ships that size. Well, maybe they did, and maybe they were going across the Atlantic. That doesn't seem like it's out of the question.
There's a lot of evidence to prove that the Phoenicians actually came up the Mississippi River into Michigan.
For the copper.
And
For
the copper specifically, the Michigan copper mines. Yeah.
Yeah.
They go back, 20,000 or more years?
Yeah, the problem is people don't understand. When people see maps of the level of the ocean so many years ago, they forget that the maps only show what the water changed. They don't show what the land changed. And we have to think in isostatic and eostatic movements. And these are the ones that are going to actually make the difference, because when you take a mile of ice on top of a continent and put it on the ocean, that's why even today, America is still rising. The continent is still rising from the lack of the weight of that ice. While the bottom of the ocean will drop significantly when the water comes back in. What this tells us is that places like the Azores, before the Younger Dryas, were completely outside of the water. All we see now is the top of the mountains.
Yes.
That the mountain is 1 kilometer down, so it's 0.6 of a mile down, the base of the mountain.
Leon, do you know about Doggerland? I know, right?
About who? Sorry.
Doggerland.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Well, all of that stuff around Great Britain and everything going all the way down into France, all of that stuff was above water at one time.
It was a paradise.
Right. And it was all, inhabitable. And they believed that there were so many different cultures there. Personally, I think that when the Doggerland finally went down, I think a lot of that, those people went across the ocean back to America, some sort of a drift over there, because it seems like all of those cultures, you can find indicators in the mounds in America that it's sort of related in some, Paleolithic way.
Yeah. For sure. But what was about?
They found Welsh inscribed onto stones in the States.
Yeah, the KRS stone. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a place here in New Hampshire that is the underground vault where they found Druidic writing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame that all the Druids couldn't get there to escape the Romans. But maybe some of them did, actually.
Yeah. But
well,
here,
Leon, sorry.
I was gonna say here in New Hampshire where I'm at, I'm on the sand barren, and there's giant like stones everywhere just deposited. But there was over 2.4 miles of ice above the earth where I am right now at one point.
Yeah.
So what I was saying is the particular case of Azores means that in one place, any other place on the world, in continental land, where we would have a movement of 100 meters, on the Azores, you can have a kilometer. And let me explain why. And a kilometer is 0.6 of a mile. Let me explain why. Because the Azores are in the very point where 3 continental plates meet each other.
Yeah.
So it's the most plastic place on Earth because those plates meet there, which means when you put all that water inside, those plates will press way down, and where you see 100 meters of water in other places was a kilometer or more on the Azores. All of that was above water, all of it. So
they were once the high places where they would build these structures.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So this to say that it is more than proven that we had transoceanic capabilities in at least the Neolithic. Okay, but we know the technology doesn't come suddenly, so it's all the Stone Age can be integrated in transoceanic because the seas were lower. There were much more islands. You can go from island to island, as Plato described by Solon the Elder. And
Robby.
Well, I was going to say the Basque, as far as their genetics, they're specific and they date back further, and as well as the Azores have a specific genetic that dates back further. So you have these two groups of people that kind of have some of the oldest genetics that we know.
Yeah.
Me and Robby did a show on the 68th Convocation, which goes into the Rosicrucian stories of the sinking of Atlantis.
Yeah.
And what they believe is that there was a massive land bridge going from the Yucatan all the way over to Africa. And that was what they considered to be Atlantis in this 68th Convocation book, which was a meeting of the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians in 1916. And what they had in that book was also the seal of the United States 15 years before it was revealed to be the reverse seal on the dollar bill. So that triangle, that pyramid shape was in that book before 15 years before they announced the reverse of the seal to the public. So this is a pretty important meeting.
Yeah, as far as the Novus Ordo Seclorum, going back to Virgil's announcement of the sibling prophecy and the coming age of Apollo,
Direct line of oral history going back to what I believe was the Stone Age. That's amazing.
Yeah. Just imagine this, for instance, not all is as clear as we see, because, for instance, the temples were supposed to have been born in a specific year, which I can't remember right now. The fact is, 10 years or 15 years prior to the creation of the Templars, that it's supposed to be a creation of one guy and then enlisted others with the same vision. 15 years before that, the first contacts by the Templars were made in Portugal to the mother of which would be the guy that would create Portugal for them. Okay, and this guy was Afonso Henriques. So 15 years earlier, they already secured land in the area that was the Condado Portucalense at the time. Was not Portugal. It was a small area like Oporto, where the wine comes from. And it was called Oporto because it was, in Portuguese, Porto, it means harbor. And so after that, we find that the Templars are created. They came to Portugal with specific intent of looking for something here, and they go all the trouble to create a king to conquer the land to the Moors in order for them to receive the land that they wanted. Now, on the first seal, and that's why it's called Portugal, and that's why I'm saying all this, Portugal is actually what comes in the seal of the creation of the country that says, in English, verbatim, Fru U Grail. That in Portuguese is Portugal. Okay, so that's what is in the seal. And what they do, the first thing they do, they build a massive, as soon as they conquer it, they build a massive structure in Tomar, where they create one thing they call the roundabout. And the roundabout has an underground hypogeum room where they stored the supposed grail. Now, this grail, I don't think it's the physical grail. This grail is the technological grail, the healing of the land, all of that stuff. But they didn't stop there, because what they really wanted is the only known fragment of for the mystics, of course, the only known fragment, existent or found fragment of the ancient paradise. And that it's the mountain of Sintra. And in the mountain of Sintra, you have this underground structures that goes for tens of miles that connect every single palace, every single monument, every single thing is connected by massive tunnels that go all beneath the mountain. And what happened when the Templars arrived there to take it from the mystic Moors is that the Moors, for the first time and only in the entire Templar history and the Crusades history, is the one time when the Muslims turned to them and said, we would not shed blood in sacred ground. So we prefer to leave the territory and not fight. And that's how they conquered the castle of Sintra, because they all evacuated the population from the castle to a population called Rio de Moro, which means the Moors River, where the cave is still there from when they exit. And it's 1.7 miles away and goes down a mountain under a river and comes out in a massive cave. Okay? So how did they build these things? It wasn't the Moors. They already found it. And in this mountain, there is a place called Regaleira Estate. That is from a guy called João Manuel Monteiro that made a lot of money in Brazil and built the most complex structure that it was made in the 19th century that englobes every single kind of mysticism, symbology. Everything is stamped on the buildings. They are charged with it, all sides. And he has 2 initiation wells.
Ricardo, if I could jump in real quick. So what's really important to know about Spain and the Iberian Peninsula is that it's been occupied by several different groups in the Mediterranean for thousands of years. And one of those groups was the Carthaginians. And the Carthaginians were very closely related to Canaanite Phoenician people. So the whole idea of tying that back into the New World is right there through Carthage, which we don't have anymore. It's wiped off of the face of the planet.
Right.
So
Troy was also Carthaginians.
well, there's Romans,
2 Troys, but
right, but there was the Roman idea that they were the descendants of the Trojans,
right,
and you get that in the Aeneid, and then right, but there were other ships that left Troy, so there could very well be a Phoenician connection back to Troy as well.
Right.
Yeah. You know, there's a Phoenician connection with Ordens. Like even there's they say that the Phoenicians were the Phoenoi in Ireland, and obviously there's a lot of connections. If you look at it's a book called Tuggle the Thebes, so that was the taking the Thebes, and then there's another story in it's actually quite interesting. You're a bit mad at the Greek history, Headless, but there's a lot of stories in Ireland that parallel the Greek epics. Like even the Fomorians of the Lower Cabal Erin were actually supposed to be related to the Titans, and Alada was the leader of the Fomorians, and he was a Titan, and he was supposed to have got the Greece. Like like even my DNA shows the migrations back and forth, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of the stuff, Ricardo, Edison, Nick.
To back you up, yeah, you've got Galatians in the Bible. And that was a settlement of Gaul. And the Gaul people were in Turkey, in that region, for a long time before that they were kicked out by the Greeks. So the Gauls, the Saxons, and all those people are related, came right back up to Britain and Ireland. All of that memory still existed in their culture of being down in that region, because they were. They're the first ones to sack Rome.
Are you familiar with the Book of Invasions?
Even like you've seen to go back even to that's the Lower Cabal is the Book of Invasions. So when I got my DNA done, so I be a Talman McMahon and an Arden O'Neill, so I knew these stories. So what happened was I says if I got my DNA done, I could prove these migrations, and sure enough, it was proven to be the case. But even though you have another theory, and they call it the out of the Atlantic theory, and I read a couple of books and says, look, it says Chronicles of Erie, for example, says there was a deluge that separated Britain from Ireland. And when I was looking at, say, the mound cultures, so you can see clear origin from the east in America, so it goes east to west in America, and then it goes west to east in Europe. And it's like, it doesn't make sense that they went the other way in, you know. But there's quite a lot. It's quite interesting, the history, but it all goes back to it's all being hidden. And then even another story that kind of backed that up. There's a book called Ireland, Ur of the Chaldee, and I put that into the chat there as well. And that mentions the how it actually connects to Chaldea and stuff like that, and obviously the Israelites and all that. But they all go back. But even to support the Carthage thing, so McCarthy's and O'Brien's are two of the old Celtic families, okay? and they were the south. They were considered the southern Celtic families. Well, McCartig, so it's McCartig is son of Carthage. I think it's Cartaigh, Carthage.
Right.
So as it says, the DNA shows the connection back and forth. It's crazy, Sorry for jumping in there, lads.
No, you're absolutely right. Carthage was always considered the melting pot of North Africa. It was the most urbanized. It was the most sort of what you consider like sort of modern and progressive of that time period. So they had a very diminished religious culture. It was their founding myth was about a slave woman who became free. So it was a very much libertine type idea going on in Carthage, and they had people from all over different parts of the world that were living there in very close relationship to each other. Yeah, it was very cosmopolitan.
All right, if you guys don't mind, I think I probably will wrap it up here. We're almost at 2.5 hours. Hate to jump in, but at some point I got to stop. So,
We can keep going.
I know. I mean, I could, but I mean, it's yeah. Unfortunately, people will stop listening. I mean,
great talking, boys.
Yeah, for sure.
They stopped at 30 seconds according to to attention span, but
or like 45 minutes if you're lucky. Yeah. I mean, we could definitely do this again. I really appreciated the conversations. There's some really interesting stuff for sure. I really appreciate all of you bringing everything to the table. It was just a lot of different things from different areas, and it went better than I could have thought. So thank you. Headless, please let everybody know what your deal is again, just for the new people.
You can find me on YouTube, the Headless Giant podcast. I do a show every Thursday where I read your paranormal emails with my buddy Nick over there. So if you've got paranormal experiences or magical experiences or things, dreams that you can't explain, send them to me at the Headless Giant podcast at gmail.com, and I will read them and analyze them with my friend.
Awesome. Yes, and definitely check it out, because we do also cover a symbol each every week. So you'll actually, you'll learn something too, in case you never heard of them before. So thank you, Headless. And Robby Marx, my man Robby, what's up, sir?
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks for getting this group of people together with the different angles. It kind of really comes together nicely. If you want to check out my other stuff, you can check out my link tree, which is RMARX. And I've got my Nimrod, the First Skinwalker book coming. And I've got my Meta Mindcast podcast, as well as my artwork that I do for various bands and festivals. And you can check out all that stuff on my link tree.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. And again, go look on that book. You definitely got to come on after it's out so you can promote it.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
It's close.
Leon, sir. Leon, please let everybody know what you do, where they can find your work if they want.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's Orgone, ORGONE, and consciousness.substack.com. I've got most of my work on there that I've like the annotated bibliography of everything in Orgone research. Or you can go to the JPOT journal at Psych Orgone, spelt as in psychology, and Orgone.com. That's the Roberto Maglione from Italy's published a lot on there too. But yeah, one of those two sites, you can find links to everything I do from there. It's been really interesting seeing all these different angles and ancient angles, because my work has taken me to ancient stuff. So you get deep into the subtle energy. It takes you back to the ancient cultures. So I've learned a lot tonight. Thanks.
Awesome. Yes, you have a lot of assignments to go take care of too, Leon. So get at it. Let us know what happens.
Yeah.
And then Ronnie, sir, thank you so much for joining us again, man. I really appreciate it. Let everybody know what's up with you, please.
No, thanks again. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Headless, and thanks for all the lads as well. Great chat as always. You'll find me on YouTube or Twitter under Welcome to the Abyss. I've also jumped on TikTok. So what I've done is I'm hopping around a couple of different sites in Ireland just to show the different ancient churches. I'll be looking at megalithic structures. I set up an Instagram, so I'm intermittently uploading just different sites around Ireland, places I've been in Egypt, Angkor Wat, was in Cambodia, Thailand, there's a couple of places. There'll be a lot of pictures uploaded from just different trips. And they find other stuff of Nick have been on with yourself and Headless have been on with yourself. And then I've been on Ricardo's Institute of Natural Philosophy as well. So if you want to find out more what's going on with me, you can find it all there. Between Irish history and pyramid stuff and a bit of ancient history as well. Enjoy it. And thanks again, lads. Thanks for a great chat.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Ricardo, last but not least, please, sir, let everybody know where they can find you. Your work.
Well, according to Gandalf, it's a place of honor. So thank you. So I would ask people to go and look at my books. It's Stardust and The Resonant Earths that are under my name, Ricardo Calvário, on Amazon. You can find me on X as at Ricardo Calvário 1. You can find me at History, Myths, and Legends on YouTube. And I would also like to promote, even to you, if you haven't seen it, our magazine that is now on number 2. Pharaoh's magazine, so go on and look for it. It's at institutefornaturalphilosophy.org/magazine. You can download it for free. The first edition has 200 pages. The second edition, we had to reduce it to 100 because we want to print it. And the first one we were asked for 80 euros for us to print each one. So we had to reduce it. But look it up, and basically that's it. And I'm open. If anyone wants to message me questions, anything, just by all means, please do.
Thank you very much, and I'll include all your links. Again, this was really an amazing talk. I really appreciated all of your brilliant minds here together at once. It was a really wild discussion, and yeah, thank you all, for real. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.